session. We are back from closed session. The time is 7:45. Clerk Ruiz, please take roll.
Present.
Trustee Martinez Lara,
Present.
trustee Novellus.
Present.
I am present, and President Troutman.
Present.
Please let the record reflect that we have a quorum.
Item 3.1, report from closed session. Clerk Ruiz, please share.
Item 2.1, in closed session, the board received information. And item 2.2, in closed session, the board received information and was updated. Item 2.3, in closed session, the board received information and was updated. Item 2.4, in closed session, the board received information and voted on the following. In closed session, the Board of Trustees approved the appointment of Candace Trammell for elementary school assistant principal. Motion was made by President Troutman, seconded by trustee Anguiano, and carried on a 5-0 vote. In closed session, the Board of Trustees approved the appointment of Moises Merlos, for Director of Student Services. Motion was made by trustee Ruiz, seconded by President Troutman, and carried on a 5-0 vote.
Good evening, President Troutman, Clerk Ruiz, distinguished board members, Superintendent Davis, community. I am Johnny Baker, the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. I don't know why I had to introduce myself, but I did. I am here to actually share a little background information about our two appointees, so please bear with me. On behalf of the Banning Unified School District, Board of Trustees, and Superintendent Davis, we are excited to announce Candace Trammell as the elementary assistant principal for the Banning Unified School District. Mrs. Trammell has over 10 years of experience in education with the Banning Unified School District, and she started here as an instructional aide, where she then moved on her teaching career in 2014. Most recently, she has served as the instructional coach at Himmerling Elementary. Ms. Trammell's leadership roles have included administrative designee, site coordinator, and CTI coach, amongst other site responsibilities. She received her bachelor's of interdisciplinary studies and her master's in education from National University. Please join me in welcoming Candace Trammell as the elementary assistant principal in Banning Unified School District.
President Troutman, members of the school board, Superintendent Davis, and community, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm very grateful, and I plan to do my absolute best to serve our students and our community. Thank you.
Our next candidate is Dr. Moises Merlos. Please welcome Dr. Moises Merlos as the Director of Student Services for the Banning Unified School District. Dr. Merlos has over 20 years of experience in education, and he started his career as a teacher in Rialto. He then moved on to Fontana as an assistant principal, and now he is serving as executive director in the Westminster School District. Dr. Merlos received his doctorate in educational leadership from the University of Southern California, his master's in educational administration, and his bachelor's in biology from Cal State University of San Bernardino. Please welcome Dr. Moises Merlos as the district Director of Student Services for the Banning Unified School District.
Thank you, first of all, Board President Troutman, Board of Trustees, of course, the Superintendent, Cabinet, of course, our my new colleagues and our community here. I'm excited to be welcomed to this community. I felt welcome from day one, and I actually got to meet some of my future colleagues right now too. Know that I'm very thankful for the opportunity, and I look forward to serving the community. And the introduction was great. I felt I was gonna go fight Canelo Alvarez right now. It really felt that way. But again, thank you so much. It really means a great deal that I'm entrusted to serve in the community. Thank you.
Item 3.2, educational services, student matters, expulsion of students.
This item is for the board to discuss and approve to expel or not based on their recommendation.
Is there a motion to open and discuss item 3.2?
I move to open and discuss.
I second.
Sorry, that was Ms. Novales? Oh, thank you. Any discussion or questions before we vote? No? Right. Okay. Case 2023-24-18 was informational only. Case 2023-24-20 was also informational only. Case 23-24-21, the board moved forward with an amendment to the expulsion to 1 semester instead of 1 year. All those in favor? Sorry. And then let me read the fourth one, I apologize. Case 2023-24-22. That was the last one that we are voting on. They were both? Oh. Oh, okay, the board also decided to do an amendment with the expulsion to 1 semester instead of 1 year for both case 21 and 22. Any discussion? Okay, I have a motion from trustee Ruiz and a second from trustee Novales to approve item 3.2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion passes 5-0. Item 3.3, opportunity for community comment. Have we received any community comments?
We did not receive any comments.
Thank you. Item 3.4, BTA comments. I would like to welcome BTA President Anthony Garcia. Who is not here. Is he online? No? Okay. Okay. Item 3.5, CSEA comments. I would like to welcome CSEA President Jennifer Serrano, who is also not here. Is she online? Okay. Item 4, superintendent's comment. Take
Good
it
evening,
away.
President Troutman, members of the board and our community. And I always miss this part, but I wanted to congratulate our new members to the team. It's a lot of work, but I know you're ready for it because you're already doing a lot of work. So we look forward to working with you and welcoming you into our team because it's a very strong team. So I'm very happy for that. Next, Mr. Baker, you do such a great job with introductions. So I think you should probably be having someone do clips of these videos and maybe send it out for additional work. He gets so excited, doesn't he? It's like, you get excited to do that? Yeah. Yes, he does. Excellent. All right. Okay, so I just have a few things to report this evening and to share. First, I want to go back to 2 weeks ago, which seems like such a long time ago, but we had several promotions. We had our alternative education graduation. We had our high school graduation. And again, I just want to thank all of our staff. There's so much work that goes into that. Planning, time, vision, oversight, communication, clarity, and everyone puts their heart on the sleeve. Everyone puts their heart on their sleeve. And again, going back to our law enforcement and our security and our staff, I just want to really thank you because things went really smooth. And it's because of all of your work. Next, I want to talk just a little bit about summer school. Same thing, what a lot of people don't know, they think that in school districts across the country that in the summer, nobody works. Well, here to tell you, it's the opposite of that. It's almost even more work. And so I want to thank our teachers that decided and volunteered. Of course, they're being compensated to work, but to spend their time in the summer with students, the classified staff that are supporting, our district office staff that are supporting. Thank you for doing that because it makes the difference in our students' life. And I know it's a lot of work, and I know most of you, if not all of you, are preparing for summer school while we're ending the year. And that is very complex. So thank you for your commitment to that. And finally, I just want to mention our summer meals program from Child Nutrition that has already begun. And so those locations are going to be at Repler Park, the Sylvan Park, Cabazon Park, and I believe at the high school, there's a resource center that they're providing meals. So please look online for that information to ensure that we continue our meals to serve our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Item 5, consent calendar.
The recommendation is to approve consent calendar agenda items 5.2 through 5.4 as provided. All matters listed under the consent calendar agenda are considered to be routine and enacted by one motion and vote. There is no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the Board of Trustees considers the motion, unless a member of the board or administrative staff requests that specific items be discussed and/or removed.
Do we have a motion and second to approve the consent calendar as posted, as provided?
I move. A second.
I have a motion from trustee Anguiano and a second from trustee Novales. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion passes 5-0. Item 6.2, Business Services General Obligation Bonds Voter Opinion Survey Presentation.
Good evening, President Trotman, Clerk Reese, distinguished board members, Superintendent Davis, members of the Banning Unified School District leadership, the community here in person, and also viewing online and also on Channel 10. And so today I have the privilege of providing an update on the 2024 bond measure initiative. And as you may recall, back in January, we were able to provide the board an update on the voter opinion survey and the positive outcomes of the support of the community. Also, we've been working on demographic studies to then also finalize a long-range facilities master plan, helping the district identify all of its facilities needs and help also prioritize those needs. And as we all well aware, we do have aging facilities that do need a lot of resources. And so today we have an update and also have the presence here of Mr. Mark Farrell. He is with Dell Scott and Company. And today I'm welcoming him to speak here and provide the board an update because he's wearing an awesome tie today.
Good evening, President Troutman, members of the board, Superintendent Davis, cabinet and community members. It's nice to be back. It's been quite a few months since January when we presented the full survey results. So I won't go through all of that information again tonight, but did want to kind of refresh everyone's memory and then talk a little bit about kind of the next steps. So if you remember back from the survey presentation, we asked the community initially, if the election were held today, would you vote yes or no on a bond measure? We provide kind of the sample 75-word ballot question. We then provide information about the potential projects that the district was considering, the tax rates, and then we ask the question again. Now that you know more information about the bond, would you be likely to vote yes or no if the election were held today? And so this slide shows the results of those two questions. So the before information, before the voter had really any information about the bond, you can see about 65% of voters said they would vote yes or leaned yes on voting for the bond. And then after providing those details, hearing about the projects, hearing about the potential cost of the bond, that support increases. So the more information the voter has, the more likely they were to vote yes. So moved up to 68% yes and lean yes. So kind of good results in the survey, kind of giving us an indication that yes, it was feasible to continue the process to look at putting a bond on the ballot this November. The district's community has been supportive, approved 3 Prop 39 general obligation bonds in the past, and Prop 39 is the proposition, the statewide proposition that lowered the voter approval threshold to 55%. Prior to 2000, the requirement, or it was 2001, was 2/3. So you had to get 2/3 support. So you can see Measure L, Measure R, and Measure M passed. Those provided a total of $75 million in funding for school facility improvements here in Banning. And the one thing to note with Measure M actually didn't authorize any new bonds because of the Great Recession and the drop in real estate prices and assessed values. The district was delayed in accessing the full amount of Measure R. So the board at that time made the decision not to do anything let's say creative and expensive. They didn't kick the can down the road, issue bonds that were going to be paid off over 40 years, not have interest payments for years and years. And so made the decision to go back to voters and say, if you'd like us to continue the program, we need you to vote for Measure M, approve that $25.5 million, and really ultimately save the community millions and millions of dollars by not doing some of the gimmicks that other districts fell into at that time during that recession. So as we look ahead to November and the potential bond measure that the district could place on the ballot, we're kind of recommending, based on the survey results and the facility needs, $74 million bond measure. That would have an average tax rate of just under $51 per 100,000 of assessed value. With Prop 39, a unified school district is allowed to ask for up to $60 per 100,000, so it'd be a little bit below that maximum level. And then the table on the right shows kind of a potential bond issuance schedule. This is not set in stone. This is not set by the election. The election would set the not to exceed amount of $74 million. And then the board would have the discretion to make the decisions on the timing of when to issue bonds and the exact dollar amount. So if projects are happening more slowly, you wouldn't necessarily need to issue $25 million, $24 million, $25 million in kind of this sequence. Potentially the issuance amounts could be a little bit smaller or spread out longer or accelerate a little bit if the project needs dictate. So we would continue to work with the district on kind of developing that bond issuance plan to meet with the construction needs for the projects that you have. And before each one of these series of bonds, the board would make that decision whether or not to approve a resolution to issue the bonds. And then in terms of next steps, we would work with legal counsel to draft the resolution here over the next week or so. That resolution could come back to the board at your June 26th meeting for consideration. The filing deadline with the county, with Riverside County, to get the bond on the ballot is August 9th. So we have a little bit of time, but the county always prefers getting the resolution a little bit early for all the work that they have to do to get the bond on the ballot in November. And then the district actually has one piece of advocacy you can do, and that is the argument. So we would work with the district to draft the argument in favor of the bond. If anyone in the community filed an argument against, we would help you draft the argument and rebuttal to the argument against. And those get filed in mid to late August, as you can see here. The other thing the district can do is provide information. So you can continue to provide factual information to your community about your facility needs. So you're kind of working on the demographic study and the facility master plan. That information is fair for you to communicate out to your public, to your parents and community at large, whether you hold town hall meetings, provide the information online, et cetera. The district can do that to inform the community about the facility needs and the potential bond measure. The election is November 5th, and the district could have funding as early as January, February of 2025 if you wanted to move that quickly. And that is the end of the presentation. Happy to answer any questions you have ahead of preparing the resolution for the board at the next meeting. Yes.
They know I'm going to. This $51 per 100,000 is for the 74 million. How is that distributed? I mean, how is that partitioned out to taxpayers? And this is all, the bond is all on people who own homes, right?
So the tax would apply to every taxable property within the district. So residential, commercial, industrial, et cetera. It is basically a percentage, that $51 per 100,000 of assessed value. So it applies to every property the same based on the value of that property.
Right.
So-
And then in 2025, is that, because it's 25 million, is that 1/3 of the $51 per 100,000?
So no, it would be, the average would be 51 over the entire life of the bond. So when we would issue, let's say the first series of bonds at first, say 25 million, but we'd bring that tax rate up to about, to that $51. It would stay there for a couple of years. It would then drop down to make room for the next series of bonds, bring it back up to the $51, drop it back down, and then allow the third issuance. So overall, kind of the voters and the community would in general see a tax rate that'll kind of hover right around that $51 mark for the entire life of the bonds.
Okay. Okay. So it's, what you're telling me is that it's going to be the entire $51 for the,
Correct.
so.
Yes,
if
as
you're-
it is laid out here, yes.
Right. But if, oh, so that's 25 years. Okay. I see what you're doing. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a quick question. On the same slide at the bottom, it says assumes Rancho San Gregorio development. What will happen if for whatever reason that development doesn't go through? Does that affect this?
So yeah, so what we would do is probably reduce the dollar amount for each issuance, or maybe not necessarily the first series, but we would reduce the dollar amount that we issue in each series and maybe need to add a series on at the end. So we can adjust so that the full $74 million will be available to the district. It might just take longer than the 6-7 years we have listed in this table for the district to be able to issue all of those bonds.
Okay, I have one other question. The interest rate at 4.75, does the interest start on the entire principal at the
No,
beginning?
Very good question. No, the interest only starts on the dollar amount that is issued. So for example, if after the election, we really start doing the planning, if the district says, well, we really don't have $25 million in need over the next 3 years because it's going to take us a year or two to really do the planning and get things through the Department of State Architects for approval. Maybe we only need $10 million for that first series. Then you'd only be paying interest on that first 10 million. So we just laid out this scenario, kind of trying to keep roughly equal dollar amounts in each series, just for illustrative purposes.
Okay, so we're basically not paying interest on anything we're not borrowing. as far as
Correct.
bonds.
So if the district, there's no sunset provision. So if for some reason you decided never to issue bonds or to hold off on issuing bonds for 5 years, there'd be no payments, no interest accruing for that period of time.
And what about the taxes for the
And no taxes.
no tax increase?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 6.1, public hearing 2024-25 preliminary local control accountability plan and budget. The Board of Trustees will now conduct a public hearing on the 2024-25 preliminary local control accountability plan and budget. Now is the time and place for the hearing. The time is 8:10 p.m. And at this time, I invite Dr. Kazi Bush and Mr. Herrera to present on the preliminary LCAP and budget with their teams.
Good evening, President Troutman, distinguished members of the board, Superintendent Davis, members of the community. We are here to present a preliminary version of our local control and accountability plan and budget, also known as the LCAP. Just want to talk a little bit about some state and federal accountability that you likely have already seen integrated into some of our goals and actions in the LCAP. On the state side, you'll see highlighted differentiated assistance, which looks at certain student subgroups and their progress over the years. And then on the other side, you'll see the federal accountability, which we typically tend to be more familiar with when we reference schools that are CSI as well as ATSI. The point of both accountability programs is to ensure that the LCAP is addressing the needs of those student groups. As always, we tend to be quite aggressive in reaching out to various community partners to get their input. And so this is a list of some meetings we've held at every single school site to engage the entire school community, which may include parents, teachers, students, anyone who's connected with that school community or another school was welcome to come, as well as parent advisory meetings, DLAC, and meetings with our bargaining unit teams. Just in terms of a timeline, this process is year-round. As you can see, we started in the fall in terms of developing the timeline, identifying focus groups, gathering information to what you saw on the previous slide, moving towards community engagement and collecting that input from each of those meetings. And then, of course, working with our business services department in partnership. And then finally, the actual plan development. And then, of course, receiving input as well from our COE, who every year provides us with a lot of detailed feedback, the public hearing, which we're here for this evening, and then, of course, the submission of final approval at the June 26th board meeting. And so what this includes, of course, is the LCAP, which is actually the third bullet, our budget overview for parents, and then the annual update of last year's programming. New this year, you were used to seeing about 4 to 5 goals, and we've worked to condense those 4 to 5 goals into 3, plus an equity multiplier, which I will explain later. Essentially, the first goal includes academic achievement along with professional development. Our second goal has to do with creating safe environments in our schools and our entire district for students. And the third goal has to do with increasing and strengthening parental and community engagement. I will talk about the equity multiplier goal after we go through some of the actions for our major first 3 goals. All right, in terms of accelerating academic achievement, we have about 17 actions in the LCAP that describe the various things that we would like to set out to do to continue to improve and boost student academic achievement. We've grouped them into these 4 themes or buckets, if you will. But just as a quick example, you'll see for the support for English language arts and mathematics, that one we're very proud to continue to want to continue our instructional coaching program, as well as the continued integration of instructional aids, professional development for all, which would include certificated as well as classified staff, and then also our technology department in terms of being able to help provide resources for all, for students and to staff, to be able to improve academic achievement. Another theme has to do with the support of English language development. And this is another quite significant goal because that is going to include everyone. As you see, we have an English language development specialist who we're very fortunate to have to work with all of our students from K to 12, our bilingual aides who are equally as essential in providing the additional layers of support for students and professional development, again, which is for everyone. The continued growth and exposure to various instructional strategies to help improve and move our English learner students forward so that they can eventually be reclassified as fluent English proficient. College readiness has been and will continue to be a significant goal for us. We have our college and career counselor, which we're very fortunate, and who has already made a major and significant impact in exposing our students to various in-state and out-of-state opportunities for college. And then, of course, our career technical education teachers with the various industry sectors that they continue to focus on. Finally, in this category is support for our extracurricular programs, including our athletics programs, VAPA, as well as academic engagement and enrichment. Moving forward to goal 2, which is arguably the foundation of everything. How can we create a safe and supportive learning environment for students? And it has to begin with feeling a sense of safety. If our students don't feel safe, to what extent are they able to fully attune and engage with the learning? And so taking that very seriously is the continued counseling and mental health support. As you see with our elementary counselors, we have nursing support, we have LVN support, and our behavior support personnel. As far as various safety initiatives and other personnel, you will see our campus supervisors. We have a coordinator of safety, our yard duty aides who are out and present on schools' campuses on a regular and daily basis, safety equipment, and our visitor management system. In addition, some other student services support, which you'll see, will continue to be improved attendance outreach to families and to parents in an effort to have attendance campaigns that promote students coming to school. And we know to get students to come to school, we have to have an engaging and safe learning environment. Behavioral support, various support staff, and earlier this evening, our brand new Director of Student Services. No pressure, Dr. Milos, if you're still there. And then our third goal, which will be our increased parent and community engagement, which this is going to be a wonderful opportunity for us to improve and grow how we're reaching out and connecting to parents and being creative and finding other ways to continue to forge a relationship with them. And communication platforms, which include things such as our website, making use of social media, and also providing some training for sites in terms of increasing their level of capacity and how they're reaching out to parents and to the community, and just overall improved effective outreach. What other kinds of things are we doing, again, to create relationships with parents and to get parents to want to come onto our school campuses and to be involved? Equity multiplier. The equity multiplier is specific to 3 school sites. And what the multiplier is, it is a stability rate, which simply means, do we have a certain, what percentage of our students come to school on a daily basis? And the formula or the ruling basically says, if you have a non-mobility rate that's greater than 25%, which basically means if you have more than 25% of students who don't come to school every day, then those schools are identified as having a high transiency rate. And so our three schools that were identified are Banning Independent Study and New Horizons. And the particular goal we have for them is to increase their graduation rate and college support, ultimately in improving their academic outcomes. We want them to come to school. We want to increase their academic achievement, and we want to ensure that they're positioned for when they leave the Banning Unified School District, they have options of what they want to do. And so the challenge, obviously by definition of this, is a high transiency rate. And so that is why we've had to identify what specific goal we're going to have for these schools. As far as Florida Street Discovery Center, which is our early learning center, we see here that our focus is going to be early numeracy and literacy, which are research-based in terms of what is going to best position us to improve our students, our youngest students, is to ensure that they are as literate as early as possible. And so how we're able to do all of this is to be able to leverage budget and resources so that we can, in fact, ensure that we are providing these services in a responsible way to all of our students. And at this time, I would like to transition over to our Business Services Department.
Thank you, Dr. Kozabush. Good evening again. And this is an illustration here, perfect segue to transition from the plan to then now the resources that are supporting the plan. This particular graph here, visualization, very familiar, has been provided in various occasions. And we do focus on the middle portion in terms of supplemental and concentration grant funding when we do speak of the LCAP and the services for increase and improve, for students that are in increase and improve services. So with that, I would like to highlight that when we consider base funding and our additional supplemental concentration funding, also known as SNC, for every $1 that is received, $41 need to be spent on increase and improved services because of the demographics that we serve in our community at a duplicated pupil count of 91%. In terms of the budget cycle, as a reminder, it is a preliminary budget. This is an informational item today. Again, we're still in the public hearing process here, and would like to point out some of the key components of this particular time in the cycle. As you have also seen in the past, there's this illustration here showing the budget cycle in the form of a clock, and we are covering roughly 50% of the cycle in the last couple of months leading up to the enacted budget in July. The budget does include the fiscal year 2023-24 estimated actuals, which is the current year, the projection for next year, and 2 subsequent years known as the multi-year projections. These projections are based on very conservative assumptions in terms of enrollment and average daily attendance. Also, all in alignment with the LCAP, which is why we are co-presenting today. And one of the items that we do have today that we didn't have back in March when presenting the second interim is latest information from the state level via the governor's May revise. So there has been positive news in the sense of the cost of living adjustment increase from 0.76% up to 1.07%. Of course, it is a positive. We'll take it any day. However, statewide, because of the increased cost of, say, PERS, for example, utilities, consumer price index, also in many cases, like in the case of the Banning Unified, decrease in enrollment, this COLA is just not enough to support the ongoing increases in costs. And we'll talk about some of those challenges and how we've developed a plan to address those challenges. Also, at the state level, there are deficit revenues. There's also been an overpayment from the prior year. All to say that the state is resolving that issue through dipping into the Prop 98 reserves that were pretty much developed through statute to pretty much help out in a situation of an economic downturn. And that is currently where we're at the state level. Now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Eddie Ramos, Director of Fiscal Services.
Good evening. And just to piggyback a little bit on what Mr. Herrera said about that rainy day fund, when we attended the governor's May revise, they did tell us that the state of California is planning to exhaust that entire rainy day fund in the upcoming fiscal year. So that is one of their mechanisms. Now, taking a look at our district enrollment, we displayed on the graph is a span of 9 years. Now, what this shows us is where our enrollment has been historically, and the 3 bars on the right-hand side do show our projected enrollment. Now, back at first interim budget reporting in December of 2023, our projections were looking relatively flat. However, as we've updated information, our projections are looking at a new trend of declining enrollment. Now, in the span of 9 years, we are looking at a little bit over a 500 decrease of students in that span of 9 years. So now let's talk about the summarized revenue and expenditures for the upcoming year. Now, the estimated actuals column is our projected revenues and expenses for the 23-24 fiscal year, so our current fiscal year. The preliminary budget is our projected dollar amounts for the new school year. Now, one of the things I'd like to highlight is the total revenues are decreasing from 94 million down to 77 million. Now, as you may recall, we have been in a time period where we had quite a bit of one-time funds, and we had some dollars that we've been carrying over year to year. Now, we've been spending down those dollars, and now those one-time funds are coming to an end. So the revenue decrease of 94 million down to 77 million is a result of those changes. Now, along with the ending of those one-time funds and removing those carryover dollars, our expenditures are decreasing as well. Now, down at the bottom of the slide, you'll notice that we have the reserve for economic uncertainties, and our change from estimated actuals to the upcoming budget is minimal. We have about a 1% change in that reserve. So going back to that restricted and one-time funding, this slide illustrates all of the various one-time funding sources and the dollar amounts that have been budgeted by fiscal year. And you'll notice that on the right-hand side in the 26-27 fiscal year, the majority of those funds will be spent. There is a line, a road down at the bottom for the Learning Recovery Block Grant. We do have some funds there, and as well as we have some funds at the top for the expanded learning opportunities. But in the 23-24 fiscal year, at the bottom, there's a totals row. There's $9.9 million that we had budgeted to spend in the 23-24 year. But as you move on to the 26-27 year, you'll notice that the funds, they decrease over time, and gradually we go from 9.9 million down to 3.9 million. Okay, so now I'll hand it over to Mr. Herrera to review the budget stabilization plan.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. And so just to piggyback on some of the information that he provided about the one-time funding, just wanted to note that the Expanded Learning Opportunity Program is an ongoing funding source, and that made up the majority of those funding resources moving on in the future out years. And so as we transition now to then the plan to pretty much right-size the budget and some cost mitigation, the teams have been working together for maybe the span about 5 months since we first found out that there were going to be significant changes to the cost of living adjustment. And so this was brought forth at the first interim, what those impacts could be for our current projections at that point. And this process was not only a lengthy process, but a very involved process with various educational partners within the organization, principals working with department leads, working through the process of what it is that we can go ahead and reduce and trying to minimally impact the classroom as much as possible. Also, this is information that was shared with all administrators, including in our latest budget committee last week. And so here we have the recommendation for phase one, the budget stabilization plan, which includes 21 positions altogether, which are all attributed to attrition and or vacancies not being filled rather. I do want to reiterate some of the conversations we've had at the budget committee, also in other spaces within the organization in terms of how the positions here are, again, vacancies that are not filled, attrition, employees leaving the district as well. There has been no cut in positions. The district didn't go through what is known as the March 15 process to lay off any employees. There are some reassignments in some cases as well. And so all that to say that it's really through the hard work and collaborative spirit here of the departments and the district administration, solicitation with the school sites as well to right-size the budget. Again, Mr. Ramos did a great job in presenting the information of the influx of resources. And there's a certain degree of service that usually comes in with the additional influx of financial resources. So now it's really trying to right-size our budget, still leverage some of those resources that are restricted in nature that we can utilize and leverage as we spend our most restricted dollar first. So back in March, we had a target. Our unrestricted general fund deficit was $4.3 million. Today, we present a plan showing $2.9 million in cost reductions. And just wanted to also emphasize the fact that this is a very fluid document, right? This is just a preliminary document. And for example, in the narration that was shared and posted as a board agenda, line item number 12 had about $1 million. Through refinement, that is now $500,000, really just a testament to how this continues to evolve as more information is provided as we continue to go ahead and dial in our budget process.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
I know it's fluid and I see that most of these are positions, but I have to ask, is there room in there for safety measures?
Is there room in here for safety measures, meaning reduction of costs and safety measures, or maintaining the level of expenditures? And
Maintenance.
so that is a great question that I'll get to in just a few. So if you give me a
Sorry.
few seconds, I'll get there in just a second.
Thank you.
No problem.
So just to clarify, these are descriptions of the positions that we're not going to have anymore?
That is correct.
So I'm concerned, how are we gonna make up for not having these positions?
In terms of
Like
services to
services
students,
for our students, yeah, like,
Let me just add that there are several positions on here that we never filled, that were in the
know which
budget
ones
and
are
have, yes, so the fiscal account technician, number 2, that
that was
position
never filled?
was never filled.
Number
Number
three.
3, IT network administrator was never filled.
Mhm.
When we talk about legal fees, this is something that I've expressed to the board over the past several years, and we've saved actually hundreds of $1,000s on legal costs. The 2 educational clerks, I don't believe
Never
those
filled.
were ever filled. The licensed vocational nurse, if you recall, if we go back to the pandemic, there were several positions that we needed to add to assist us with the COVID processing. So that's down, I believe, 1, which we did not replace. Now, number 7 is the one where we had 8 basically teacher specialists, meaning that 2 at each elementary site. So this is cutting that in half to still provide that service, 1 per site.
Like per side?
Correct. Number 8, these were additional days that we had added to our instructional coaches, which we believe that we can go back to their regular base and figure out how their planning time is conducted, like in the beginning of the year. Secondary counselor. So that one in particular, we had a total of, well, I'll say it this way. In terms of academic counselors, there were 4 academic counselors at the high school, 2 mental health therapists, and 1 college and career counselor. So this was an opportune time, given change, to go down one to still be able to provide the support.
So now we have 3 academic counselors?
So now we'll have 3 academic counselors, 2 mental health counselors, and a college and career counselor at the high school level. The ATS elementary teacher, that is 1 FTE, as we found looking at our ATS programs across the district, going down by 1 ATS teacher. Security deals with the amount of security that's at Coombs, and yes.
That one school, sorry. So one school will not have an ATS elementary teacher?
So what we did, we didn't have a teacher. We had an instructional aide, basically a paraprofessional working with a counselor at 1 elementary site, which was Central. Last year, we moved that program to Coombs Alternative, and it didn't prove to be successful because we didn't have parents who wanted to take their student, their elementary student, and go to Coombs. And so our plan this year is to support students at each of their school sites by going down by 1 teacher. Next, security 2, again, going back to the programs that were at Coombs, we believe we can go down by 1 security. And again, this is all due through attrition. Number 12, I'll come back to that and ask you to talk about that, Mr. Herrera. School resource officers. So we had 3 school resource officers, and that's been quite for several years. That's a lot of money and a lot of costs. Our resource officers are outstanding, but we believe we can go down to 2. When we initially talked with Banning PD, we talked about there may come a time due to fiscal constraints that we would have to go down, and they were in agreement with that. We'll be meeting with them soon to talk about that. So what will happen over time through their staffing, through attrition, they would just absorb one of those resource officers. So moving from 3 to 2. And then marriage, family therapist, we did have a resignation. So it would be not filling one of those positions. And then number 15, those teacher staffing overages deal with the enrollment. If we go back to the slide, I'm not asking you to go there, but as you can envision our enrollment being decreasing over time, we should always be adjusting our FTE allocation. And FTE stands for full-time equivalency to staff for those students that we don't have. And so that's all of those in a nutshell. And if you can talk about supplemental concentration add-ons.
Absolutely. And so the supplemental concentration via the LCAP did include various add-ons in the form of allocations to sites. Those were adjusted and or redirected to other funding sources, ultimately impacting the unrestricted general fund in a positive manner. So for example, there was attendance incentives and there, academics incentives, which also through the changes in the increase in approved services realm in terms of compliancing, there's been some changes there as well. So we were able to materialize a savings in the unrestricted general fund by leveraging other restricted funding sources in some cases.
And I do want to go back to number 13 because I felt a little heat. I don't even have to see it. I could just feel it a little bit. So those school resource officers, those 3, those were all funded by one-time money, ESSER dollars. So now that we don't have that money, all of that shifts to the general fund. So we have to make changes and look at our budget because we have to decrease. I think you mentioned $4.2 million. So that
1.3 was the target.
1.3. So that has to come from somewhere. So all this was a culmination of conversation, looking at our programs and how we can scale as we decrease enrollment.
So in regards to that item, if we're going down to 2, what is the district going to do with allocating their time throughout the district? Like, where are they going to be focused primarily on? And what are we going to do to those areas that we won't have their presence?
So that is going to be an ongoing conversation that we have. So I just mentioned this because it's on the plan, but we have not met with Banning PD yet.
Okay.
So we're a little ahead. However, those 2 resource officers will primarily be located at the secondary level. The middle and high school with support to the other campuses as needed. Recently, in the past year, we've really only had 2 because we were down 1 and then we actually got down to 1 because one of our SROs was out on paternity leave. So we've been able to work through this because they are outstanding, but we need to really look at our budget.
Okay, and then is it going to be on the table still a possibility that once we are stabilized, we're able to bring them back as a priority?
Or take a look at what our needs are through our committees and our plans. And I do have more to say about this, but it's not the right time.
Mr. Davis, could I just interject something here?
Please.
I noticed on the bond that we were saying, thanks to Sangiano, that Rancho San Gregorio development, was going to project a 3% growth, increase in growth. Do we know when that development is going to be?
That's a great question. And this is part of my job I love, the anticipation of what's going to come up because what we see. And so I did ask Mr. Herrera to look into it because I anticipated that question.
Absolutely. And so the conversations with the Rancho San Gregorio development right now have been stalled in terms of moving forward, at least from the district's perspective, and working with the district and supporting development for the purpose of building a school there should the development move forward. Based on my information, and there may be more information available, that there was some CEQA, and I am not going to remember the acronym, but however, there's been some environmental challenges there with the space. Also, the latest I know is that there was also an easement challenge that required to purchase other land. Again, this is all information that I have at the moment through the development of the demographic study. Also, our developer fee justification study, we have engaged with the city to make sure that we're following up and have the latest information, and we become a part of the communication as information evolves with the development in our city.
Okay, thank you. Did OSHA do any kind of a mitigation study and a report on that?
I'm not too sure, but we can follow with the city in terms of what studies have been conducted for that development.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Aguiana, I do want to go back to your question because, again, I feel it. And I want to be clear about this. We don't want to make any of these cuts. We're a small district and it's a lot to do. So at any point, as we move forward with the budgets that we receive from the state, we want to restore things and we want to provide the targeted support that we need for students. So yes, if our fiscal situation improves, then we make additional adjustments to ensure that we're doing the best that we can.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Absolutely. That's good.
So number 6, licensed vocational nurse. How many do we currently have at this time?
If I'm not mistaken, 3 active LVNs. Excuse me, 2. This
We
would be the
have
third
2
one.
LVNs and 1 nurse, 1
That's
registered
correct.
nurse.
3 in my mind.
And what sites do they operate out of typically?
So, anyone?
And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Wilford, but our nurse is responsible district-wide for our programs and services. And I believe the 2 LVNs support students that have more severe needs.
At various sites.
And I don't know if we need to go any deeper than that, but unless you feel we need to answer that in more depth.
All school sites would be the response at all school sites.
Okay.
Okay, I was just curious because I know there's been a lot of incidents that, you know, the board gets notified on whenever an incident happens at school with a student. And I'm wondering if we had a medical person, such as an LVN or RN, I don't know where the RN is during the time of those incidents, but maybe if they were there or if we had another to kind of help with that, then maybe we wouldn't. Oh, this is coming out wrong. I'm so sorry. Yes. Didn't want to say it. Yeah, but then we wouldn't need to call paramedics to have them transported to the hospital. Maybe if there was an RN who could triage them right then and there and make that decision, you know, what needed to be done, or if the child did need to be transported to the hospital. I just feel like my opinion is we've been lacking as far as medical care for these kids, you know, nurses for students at schools. And I understand we can't have one for every site. I completely understand that. I'm not arguing that. But I do feel like we need more, not less.
So let's have Dr. Wolford answer that, because Dr. Wolford, if you can explain the difference between an LVN in their service to students, like as an example for diabetic needs or other medical needs versus any type of emergency situation or,
I do understand. I know the difference, but my concern is if we had another person, because I know our LVNs are mostly caring for the special needs students, which I'm not arguing at all. But if we had another person to help triage when incidents happen at schools, then like, again, we wouldn't need to call paramedics and send them, off to the hospital. I mean, if they're having a stroke, then yes, please get them quickly to the hospital. But if it's something less severe, this is more for you, Mr. Hura. If it's
Okay,
something,
so anytime that there is an incident, the school sites are supposed to call the district nurse, who will then call the LVNs and will either deploy the district nurse or the LVNs. But there are certain incidences and certain types of accidents that do occur that are going to require a 911 call. And even if the nurse goes and does a quick assessment, a lot of times we still call the paramedics to make sure that the student is not in danger, especially in head injuries where a loss of consciousness, even for 30 seconds, we want them to be seen by a medical provider. So even with more nurses, because I'm gonna be honest, I always say, yeah, we could use another nurse, but even with more nurses, it might not mitigate the 911 calls and the ambulance due to the nature of the incidents and what's happened.
I was unaware of the process that LVNs were utilized to triage those children.
Mhm.
I wasn't aware.
And
But-
unless they're in the middle of diabetic care or in the middle of a G-tube feed or some other procedure, maybe giving a breathing treatment, whatever they might be doing at the school sites, then yes, if they're nearby, we deploy them. Okay?
I would just have to respectfully disagree because we almost on a daily basis, we get those emails about a student at schools being transported and taken. So I would just have to respectfully disagree.
No, I'm not saying that they go to every incident. I said if we can, we go, but that doesn't mean we still don't call 911 depending on what happened.
And I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just saying if we had someone there to quickly assess, I think it'd be better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving forward in terms of the budget and looking at multi-year projections, there is a set of assumptions. We already talked about enrollment. We haven't talked about our average daily attendance, and what I would like to inform the board that our attendance rates for the current fiscal year have been very, very good in the sense that we usually see a decline from December into spring when we do our attendance reporting. We maintain a very steady 9.3%. Does jump up to about 9.4 due to a rounding issue that I was trying to figure out. But it is flat moving forward in terms of our projections. Historically, the district has been about 93%, and through the help of Dr. Malone, that's filled in the building here, we hope to really focus on enrollment strategies and also mitigating the loss of ADA due to students not being engaged in school. We are currently Living on in terms of revenues on a 3-year average in terms of mechanisms within state funding. I would like to remind the board here of the ADA relief that was provided in terms of funding by the state due to the pandemic. And statewide, we are seeing a huge decline in over average daily attendance, where the average of chronic absenteeism, student being out absent, was about 6 days or so. Those has increased to about 14 days as a result of the pandemic and some of those patterns changing with our students attending on a regular basis. Another key indicator is the unduplicated pupil count, identifying the very unique population of students that we serve, generating the increase in improved services resources. Also, for the 24-25 fiscal year, we do see the COLA at 1.07. However, the 2.93 and 3.08% in the subsequent years is demonstrating coming back to a normal cost of living adjustment. So that is the latest projections that we have. Of course, those numbers don't get finalized until the April of the fiscal year looking into the next. And last but not least, it's also looking at the cost of employees as it relates to pension cost. There is an increase in PERS, which is for classified employees. In that retirement system, we do see an increase of about almost 4.9% in the 3 years as compared to this year. And hopefully we do see that also leveling off into the sunset. Wishful thinking. Moving forward and isolating now the multi-year projection to just the unrestricted general fund, which is the side of the general fund as compared to the restricted side, where we are measured by in terms of a reserve of economic uncertainties and overall fund balances. I would like to redirect your attention to the deficit. So with the budget stabilization plan at almost 3 million, we still have a structural deficit in the current or the new fiscal year at $1.3 million, 1.4 in year 2 and 1.5 in year 3. We, again, did make a lot of progress through the development of the budget stabilization plan and reducing the deficit from $4.3 million down to $1.3 million. And I'll go ahead and answer the question about safety in a subsequent slide as it relates to being able to reestablish our savings accounts that are targeted for certain initiatives, including safety measures. Now we combine both the unrestricted general fund and the restricted general fund, and we put that together. And here we have the result of our projections for the 24-25 fiscal year. You notice that there is a deficit that is larger, and the reason for that is because this includes restricted funds that may not have recognized any revenues, however, are recognizing expenditures, creating the effect of even a larger deficit. But as we just reviewed right now, we did hone in on the unrestricted general fund to determine the true structural deficit within our financial projections. Moving down to the reserve for economic uncertainties, we have maintained the same level of reserves as it relates to what was projected in the previous cycle, which is during second interim for the 24-25 fiscal year. That yields a 7.16% reserve. And 5.4 in year 2 and down to 5.04 in year 3. And again, this is as a result of the structural deficit that we still have to address. Again, made a lot of progress. We were able to reestablish a lot of our components of the fund balance, also known as our savings accounts here in terms of fund balances. And the last thing that I wanted to mention, still added in here, even though it's not triggered into law, was that 10% cap in our reserve, which includes assignments, and I'll go into that in just a bit. And we'll be way below those levels, the 10% at 8.6, 6.8, and 6.45 in the subsequent years. Nonetheless, just let that on a slide to provide that continuity of information.
Sorry, I have a bad habit of not using my microphone. I was saying, isn't this exactly what we've been having the reserves for, is this uncertainty of economic hardships?
There now three different types of components of the fund balance. One is the reserve for economic uncertainties. That is the $6 million there. That is to pretty much go through the swings of an economic downturn as we're currently experiencing. $6 million is enough to cover payroll for about 2.5 weeks at most. And so generally speaking, it is recommended to have at least 2 months of our overall operating expenditures as a reserve, which is the equivalent of about 17%. So that's in terms of the reserve for economic uncertainties. The second component is in assignments or things, if you will, for the lack of a better word, that reside in the unrestricted general fund that are restricted in nature, such as medical administrative activities, which does have limitations of what they could be spent on. The last component is commitments, and those commitments are, if I may go on to the next slide, illustrated here. And so those commitments are pretty much, as an organization, what anticipated costs do we have and how do we build a safety net, if you will, into those commitments that are by board action committed into the general fund. And so that we were able to reestablish those fund balances. And those particular commitments can be utilized also to mitigate the effects of an economic downturn. For example, in being very conservative and having various options here in terms of dipping into our reserves, the third to last item, unforeseeable mitigating operating factors, also attendance loss to ADA and potential one-time funding that may be ongoing as we're trying to leverage those one-time dollars. And so I hope that answers your question. And it was a
But
little lengthy.
we already budget for salaries, correct?
That
That's
is correct.
already in your budget.
That is correct.
So I was just trying to say this would be the time that we should be seeing us dipping into those to continue services for students.
And that is correct. We're currently dipping about $1.3 million into our reserves right now because we do have an unrestricted general fund.
Sorry, my other question on this slide, attendance loss due to COVID-19, how much longer are we going to be notating that? Or how much is it supposed to still affect us if we're not?
As expressed earlier, we're still seeing the effects of loss of ADA due to the pandemic. We were historically at 93%. We haven't been able to reach that 93% yet. We are working towards that to reestablish some of the same funding levels that Banning Unified has seen in the past. And in
Right.
terms of a line
But-
item, this is a placeholder to be able to leverage those dollars should we continue to see, one, increased expenditures and or two, decrease of revenues from the state in terms of state revenue. So this is another option in terms of being able to dip into should we need to, again, use our savings account to support students in the classroom.
But I guess my question is, how much longer are we going to use it as the reasoning behind that loss of an ADA? Like, at what point is it no longer going to be considered due to COVID? I mean, there could be different variables. So I feel like it's just like an excuse.
At this point, I think it's just been utilized across the industry as to it's the information is very clear that we are, as an industry in education, suffering that loss. And so this particular line item could change in the future. And so that is always a possibility.
I feel like I have to say, unfortunately, COVID is still thriving. And then so I do see why it's still on here. But I see what you mean about, and I agree. I was thinking the same thing. How long are we going to use this as a crutch?
Absolutely.
But I
I see what you're saying.
personally know COVID is still around, where the kids are still passing it around. And like the flu, it comes in waves.
Absolutely. And we can work through the terminology as well. And so definitely open to that feedback. So thank you very much. I do want to, again, just come back and make sure I answer the question about safety. You do see $715,000. we were able to reestablish as a previous funding level, which was about $1.3 million. And we're actually recognizing about $200,000 in the current fiscal year and an additional $400,000 in the next fiscal year to continue with the work in terms of safety measures to improve for our students and our staff.
Can
Another-
I ask a quick question? I know I've asked this before, but can you remind me? So I see Universal Transitional Kindergarten,
Mhm.
but they have their own separate funding.
They do have their separate funding. This is for the current facilities project, and this was built into the unrestricted general fund as a commitment, as a contingency, not only for the current project, but also the potential of adding a kitchen infrastructure that is currently not existing, an MPR as well. And so as we're working through that particular project and identifying should there be any funding gaps, this is a line item that can help mitigate that potential shortfall, if any, and or do additional projects at Florida Street as we continue to expand and focus on early education.
That wouldn't be considered facilities? That'd be considered still UTK?
Yeah. So this is part right here, and what would have been helpful is to include facilities as part of UTK. Yes, you're absolutely correct. We do receive additional dollars for transition kindergarten. Also, the preschool program receives its own set of restricted dollars that are residing in Fund 12, completely outside of Fund 01.
So you just mentioned about adding the kitchen structure. I know that we have other sites that don't have a kitchen. Is that something that's going to be looked into? Or where does that fall under, since not all sites have a kitchen?
Absolutely. And so to better answer that question, we do have a lot of balls up in the air in terms of one, priorities, and two, trying to leverage resources, financial resources. And so this particular one here was added because of the construction project that's currently there at the Florida Street and focusing on that project now. However, as we just had a presentation on the bond initiative, we're hoping that through the approval of the board for a for a bond initiative, and in November, getting voters to approve a bond for the Banning Unified Community is to prioritize those projects, and a kitchen over at Central has been one of those top priorities for myself as well as for Mr. Pulsifer, because it has been quite challenging utilizing our Coombs kitchen to distribute meals to both Florida Street and to Central Elementary.
I have a question about the student and staff safety improvement measures. Now that we've had a more aggressive or a more fluid safety team, this $715,000, is this already spent? This doesn't seem like a lot considering things that we want to do at, let's just say Nicollet. Things that we want to do other places. So do you have sort of, you don't have to say it now, but I mean, a line item because that seems like a little amount, the
Right.
715,000.
And it is not an expenditure at this point. This is in our savings account, if you will, earmarked for safety measures. We did bring, though, however, $400,000 into an expenditure line to continue with our safety mitigating projects here. And so we are working through various projects. The latest one that we're working through right now in the summer is emergency supplies, and that is how those $400,000 will be utilized. I know there's been conversation about a weapons detection system as well. And so we are already planning for the budget to be allocated as an expenditure, right? And it's now just moving forward with the decision-making process of how we're going to move forward with those initiatives.
But once again, this amount, the 715,000, if we have 400,000 already for emergency supplies, that's only leaving us 315 for weapons detections.
So the $400,000 that are not in this particular line item, so let me back up here. If we didn't put expenditures in the budget in that amount, we would have had roughly about $1.3 million. And that particular line item actually did get up to that funding level. However, because we had such a large deficit back at second interim in March, we had to dip into those pockets, those earmarked dollars, so that we can balance out our budget. The great news is that through the development of these cost savings measures, we were able to reestablish it to that funding level. And we can continue to have conversations of what would be the adequate amount of funding for these measures. One of the things that we did do this May is work with Mr. Shilriff, look at some of his ongoing costs, and we're actually able to shift his ongoing costs to ongoing resources in terms of revenue. And so we're being very mindful of the costs that are necessary to sustain the systems that we've developed and implemented into our system. And these would be for one-time initiatives in nature, but could have conversations on how we can rearrange some of the dollars that are allocated to these commitments.
And what the potential costs will be for the upcoming programs that we want, or upcoming, like
Cor-
weapons detection and other, I guess, construction costs to ensure safety at different schools?
Absolutely. Mr. Shilriff has done a great job of providing all that information to the Fiscal Services Department. We've been working in lockstep in ensuring that we have those commitments in our budget, given that that's one of the board's priorities.
Okay, thank you.
And so our next steps, I will speak on behalf of my colleagues here in the academics team that the LCAP is going through then another iteration of what is known as the Riverside County Office of Education Fast Pass process, where they review it, they provide suggestions. It is expected to make some adjustments and continuous refinement. We are still soliciting additional input, and please, for those watching from home or those here, if there's any additional suggestions for the LCAP, we still have our email address that would pretty much alert all those in the academics team as we continue to refine that plan. In terms of the budget, also changes in the LCAP will directly impact the budget. We're going to continue to refine our budget process as we have with the fiscal services team. And the next step is to propose an LCAP and a budget recommended for adoption on our next meeting, which is slated to take place on June 26, 2024. And with that, thank you very much for your time. And we see our graduates here, which is really the pinnacle of events for our school district. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I did have one question. When we were talking about the LCAP, Dr. Bush, we mentioned parent and community outreach. I know that we have involved some community programs and we are paying for some of those programs. But I guess my question is, how are we including volunteers? How are we doing an outreach for volunteers in the community? Because I still get questions from people that have been in education, people that have been in educational workforces like JPL and other places. We have so many resources in our community, and these people are willing to give back on a volunteer program basis. And I know that when I started, we didn't have very much of a volunteer program. So I guess in the LCAP, how are we developing programs that encourage volunteering and vetting those who want to volunteer and want to bring their community resources to our school to improve the students' educational experience?
One of the critical ways to do that is to ensure that the school site is open in terms of creating an environment where there are opportunities for parents to come onto the campus so that relationships can be forged, so that strengths can be known in terms of what are the strengths that our parents have in terms of being able to contribute and bring their talents and gifts to the school site, as well as resources that they're connected to. That begins with many things such as localized parent meetings. It could begin with school site council. It could begin with ELAC. It could begin with any other kinds of meetings a site may have, such as coffee with the principal. Those are just the baseline kinds of opportunities that our school sites are already affording. But in terms of strengthening that, we'll also be leveraging our community outreach staff person to kind of assist with making home visits. That is something actually that that particular individual already does. But as I mentioned earlier, even in terms of broadening to include things such as parent education workshops, maybe things such as having a parent university, that could be something that's done at the district level and or at the site level. But I also would be remiss without saying, in terms of being aggressive, in terms of looking at ways to leverage the many resources we have, and that I may know someone, you may know someone, is the volunteer process in terms of how can these individuals come onto our campus so that we can make sure that we're doing our due diligence and creating a safe environment for our students.
I'll just give you an example. I know someone who was a scientist at JPL, and he has been trying to volunteer. He asked Cabazon referred him to the district referred him to Cabazon. So I'm just kind of wondering what the process is, because I speak to seniors all the time, and those who have given their lives to students and to educational projects like JPL, other places. So can you, let's say I was going to do that. Can you just briefly tell me what the process is? Because I am getting the feeling that, and I'm not saying it's anyone's fault, I'm just getting the feeling that somehow there's some kind of a miscommunication or a disconnect. So how can we get these retired teachers to be able to, or retired, people who have this ability to offer and to volunteer, well-educated, and how can we get them to help us on a volunteer? Because as we say, we have a lot of budget issues. So how can we get them to, how can we streamline a process and keep our children safe?
So in terms of the process, there is a volunteer process,
Okay.
and that is typically handled by our HR department.
Oh, okay.
But however, in terms of the individuals, which I think the process is there to ensure that anyone who comes onto our campuses, that they've checked off boxes for safety.
Absolutely.
But I will also say, in terms of a school site, if there are organized events such as a career day, and it may be that at a particular site, maybe they do want people to come on, but maybe there hasn't yet been something that's been coordinated or organized to say, hey, on this particular date, I don't know, every third Wednesday of the month, we have volunteers to come in to talk to students, or we are doing a career day, I don't know, every other Friday of the month. I think it may kind of begin first and foremost with some of the goals and opportunities that the school site has set up. I do know that our principals are always very eager. As a district, we always want to ensure that our students are exposed to individuals who can come in and talk to them and share their talents and strengths. But just in terms of the process, I think one of the things that would help us is just maybe having some dedicated structure in terms of
Right.
what kinds of opportunities can we create at a site to say, this is how we're going to begin to funnel in members of the community who can come and share.
Well,
with our students.
I know that in other districts, they have like grandparents, grandparents coming in to help. And my grandson was part of that, not that he's a grandparent, but he was part of that doing his student teaching. And he mentioned that there's a grandparents volunteer group. And if they have to go in and get fingerprinted, they all understand that. And the vetting, the fingerprinting and all of that to keep our children safe. It's paramount that we do that. But also it would be helpful to have, I would think that it would be helpful to have volunteers from the community that have, that have the ability to offer that. So if, I don't know. So how do we do that?
So let me answer this, and as you know, as everyone knows, I just try to get right to it. I'm being very candid. We haven't had a clear platform of that.
Right.
So what you're talking about is a space, if you will, a landing space, whether it's per site or district, that says, on these given times, we're going to invite the community in to support students and or take the expertise of those folks to insert themselves into a lesson or into a project. But
Or
all of
just to
those,
help at a
yeah,
table or something like that.
and
I mean,
all of those things, if you ask me from my vantage point, talking to other people who want to volunteer, it does seem to be a barrier or a challenge in getting
Right.
in. Dr. Causey Bush and I met with I don't know if we want to call him a scientist. Let's call him a scientist who's heavily involved in the NASA program. So
Mhm.
we work with him. We met with him. He did go to a couple
Mhm.
school sites, but he wants to do more.
Mhm.
And so it's how do we grapple with, and I'm thank you for Dr. Causey Bush for saying this, we have to look at our overall goal and focus as a school and what we're doing with instruction in the classroom first. And
Absolutely.
then it's figuring out how those things fit. And so no pressure, Dr. Melos, but this will be a part of what he will bring to the district because this is something that he has done in his current district in terms of developing those pathways to have a space for people to come in. So it is a weakness for us.
Okay, yeah, and we had talked
Mhm.
about that last year when I first started. I've had people ask me who are teachers, said we would just, they're teachers, they're grandparents. We would like to be able to come in and help the second grade or help the third
Mhm.
grade, with whatever their program is. I know other schools do it, other districts. We did it at our district, and I'm just kind of, now that we're having issues with budgets, it's another time to address this. The volunteering, because you're talking about LCAP the volunteering for the community. So I wanted to address the community volunteering.
And I think that's fair. And I think we have to
Absolutely.
work with our principals as well as student services to create that. What does that look like in each site?
Okay.
So that the way there's avenues for it.
Thank you.
And open that up and communicate that, which we haven't been doing a good job.
Thank you.
Are there any additional public comments? Questions? Nope. Hearing no comments, I declare that the public hearing is now closed. The time is 9:17 p.m. Thank you all very much. Item 7.1, Human Resources Public Hearing. The Board of Trustees will now conduct a public hearing to adopt the Sunshine Proposals for California School Employees Association, Chapter 147, 2024-25 bargaining year with the Banning Unified School District. Now is the time and place for the hearing. The time is 9:18 p.m. Were there any public comments received regarding this item?
There were no comments.
Thank you. Is there anyone here and now that wants to make a comment? At this time, hearing that there are no comments, the public hearing is now closed. The time is 9:18. Item 7.2, Human Resources, adopt the Sunshine Proposals for CSEA.
This item is for the board to adopt the Sunshine Proposals for California School Employee Association, Chapter 147, for the 2024-25 bargaining year with Banning Unified School District.
Is there a motion to open and discuss item 7.2?
I move to open and discuss.
I second.
Any discussion or questions? I have a motion from trustee Ruiz and a second from trustee Anguiano to approve item 7.2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those in favor say nay. Hearing none, motion passes 4-0. Item 7.3, Human Resources Field Placement Agreement, Grand Canyon University.
This item is for the board to approve the field placement agreement with Grand Canyon University for student teaching and internships.
Is there a motion to open and discuss item 7.3?
I move.
I second. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll second.
Any discussion or questions? I was actually hoping, Mr. Baker, if you wouldn't mind coming up to give some more information on it, if you wouldn't mind.
Good evening. So this is a standard agreement that the district enters into with most of our universities for us to be able to place student teachers, teachers that are coming in to do their fieldwork observations, and also our administrator, college administrator interns coming in. And it just sets the parameters for, one, how is the district going to support those students coming in, as well as what is the expectation for the university to support those students when they're in our district classrooms as well, supporting students. So, and we currently have, I think, 25 of these agreements with various different universities across the country.
And how many would we have for this? For this?
This one, so we have 25 currently in place that we are working as far as universities or student teachers.
Student teachers, excuse me.
I would have to look into how many we currently have this past year. We do have several that come in that are looking for placement. So I'll get that number for you on how many came through last year and what we have moving forward.
Thank you.
All right.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Baker. I have a motion from trustee Novales and a second from trustee Anguiano to approve item 7.3. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion passes 4-0. Item 8, Business Services. Playground and shade structure equipment change order.
This item is for the board to approve CMAS number 4-22-12-1015, change order number 1 for playground equipment, turf, and shade structures to be provided and installed by Dave Bang Associates Incorporated of California.
Is there a motion and second to open and discuss item 8.1?
I move to open and discuss.
I second.
Any discussion or questions?
I do have a question. We're talking about change orders. Was there a problem, Mr. Herrera?
Yes, there was a challenge here as we continue with the work that we're currently located in a highly seismic area. In addition to that, because we're in a high seismic area and the size of the permanent shade structures that would be metal-based, not fabric-based, we have to dig a little bit deeper also. As a result of the Florida Street project, we've also learned that there is a lot of stone in our area, and so that then costs additional labor. In this particular change order, the rental of equipment is also included, and it'll be used as needed.
Okay, so was there any kind of a previous study done to find out are we on what kind of an earthquake seismic issue are we having, or do we not know that ahead of time?
So we're aware that we're in a seismic area. However, because of the approval and getting the order of equipment as soon as possible, so we can work on this project during the summer. And knowing also that we had what is known as a Division of State Architecture over-the-counter approvals. This is really now getting into the work. The evaluation was finally conducted, and that then requires the additional work in order to move forward with the project. So it was a bit of trying to get the item as soon as possible for board approval, and also then working through the process now of digging into work. And one of the reasons for most change orders is one, when we go into walls and not know what's in walls and or dig under until we then develop that or identify there's additional challenges. So it's a little bit on reverse in terms of what the evaluation should be. However, it was all due to timing.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No. I have a motion from trustee Ruiz and a second from trustee Novales to approve item 8.1. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion passes 4-0. Item 8.2, business services contractual agreements.
This item is for the board to approve and or ratify contractual agreements as provided.
And if I may, if you can scroll up, Mr. Barriga, a little bit on that document, I'm sorry, scroll down. And keep going. The last one, school innovations and achievement, that, you didn't need to click there, but thank you. That item is going to be coming back for the future. This was a 3-year agreement. We're going to move that to a 1-year agreement. So we're asking that that's taken off. It is actually taken off on the spreadsheet, but it was accidentally still included as an attachment. Thank you, Mr. Barriga, for being very attentive.
Okay, so other than school innovations and achievement, is there a motion and second to open to and discuss item 8.2?
I move.
I'll second.
Any discussion or questions? I have a motion from trustee Anguiano and a second from trustee Novales to approve item 8.2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion passes 4-0. Item 8.3, business services, monthly fiscal services reports. Sorry.
This item is for the board to approve monthly fiscal services reports, bank reconciliations, purchase orders, warrant summary, and commercial warrant registers.
Is there a motion and second to open and discuss item 8.3?
I move to open and discuss.
I second.
Any discussion or questions? I have a motion from trustee Ruiz and a second from trustee Novales to approve item 8.3. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion passes 4-0. Item 9.1, board members' comments. Would anyone like to start?
I guess I can go first. Thank you. So I would like to begin by welcoming our new team members, Dr. Merlos and Ms. Trammell. So welcome. I can't wait to see the amazing work you will be doing for our district and our kiddos. Also, I know there was a survey that went out to parents and to staff. I think it was last month. So I hope that people were able to complete it because it does give us feedback as to areas that we need to work on or what we're doing well. So I know it can be sometimes intimidating to complete, but I do hope that those that completed them, thank you for doing those, and those that haven't, hopefully you still get the reminder email to complete them. And then also our summer program started, right? This is our first week. I know it can be rocky at first, the first few days. I know it's rocky for me as a parent and the students as they get adjusting to being back in school and going in earlier than before. But I definitely want you all to know, those who have been working and making it better. Our kids are loving it. They're enjoying it. They're happy. I can see it at the elementary level when I pick up my daughter. My son is doing the summer STEM program and he can't stop talking about it. So I want to thank our teams for bringing forward these programs for our kids because they're having fun and they're learning and they're engaged. I hope that we get to see a recap or a slideshow of all the amazing things that our students are doing at the elementary level, but also over at the high school where the middle schoolers and high school students are. I think it's important for our community to see how hard our district has been working and what our kids are doing in the summer. And lastly, I hope you guys have a good night. I know it's a little later than usual, so I do apologize on my behalf. I'm here if there's any questions. Thank you.
I also want to welcome you, Dr. Marilos. Is that how you pronounce your name? And I am really excited about seeing what you're going to bring to our school. I think that attendance is really important. One of the things that I see our administrative staff working on and teachers as well is the whole idea of engaging our students, engaging them to want to come to school, to want to learn, to elevate that academic prowess and inquisition that they have. And I'm hoping to see more STEM and STEAM, not just as an add-on on summer school, which I think is fabulous. I can't wait to get over there and see it, but also into our programs to revitalize and to help the children really get excited about what the future holds for them. So thank you all for working very hard this year. Last year, like Mr. Davis said, I had no idea when I first started how busy the summers are here. And I want to thank you all for working so hard, especially in April and May. June is very busy and everything coming up, but thank you for everything you all do. Seriously, hang in there. It means a lot. Seriously, hang in there. It means a lot to all of us. And I really appreciate everything that you're doing. I didn't realize how much you all do until I went through one entire cycle, and now I see. So thank you.
Good evening. Yes, thank you for hanging in there with us. Welcome to the district. I just want to say I was able to attend 2 graduations and several promotions. They were amazing. It was exciting to see an increase in number of our graduates this year. Huge class, loved seeing it, felt very safe. I wasn't able to attend them all. It's a lot. I hope you all take time to take care of yourselves this summer. Can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself, right? So thank you for being here and keep up the great work. Thank you.
So I too would like to congratulate our new Student Services Director, Mr. Merlot, excuse me, and Ms. Trammell, excuse me. I'm tired. And I would also like to thank everyone here for their hard work. It does not go unnoticed. Thank you for the presentation and answering all our questions. It's very much appreciated. And I hope everyone has a wonderful summer and a safe night. Let's see, item 10, future board items. Any future board items?
I know that Ms. Novales shared about volunteering. Is there something that we can talk about how we're going to streamline it or what the game plan is now that we have our student service director? Or as an update?
And I know we've had some correspondence about presentations for sites. So next year, I'm gonna say this publicly. We don't have any principals in here, but I know they're listening. We will be breaking down and bringing sites, maybe one or two at a time, just to talk about what's going on, just like we did with Nicolette. The other thing that Dr. Melos is going to do in short order, once he gets his bearings on what's going on, just like we did with the communications presentation, if you recall, just kind of give an update on how he sees what's going on from the past and what he envisions to see for the future. So that's kind of a early preview when you get in there and really find out what's going on. So the other thing that I have written down is a summer school presentation in July, just as a recap, just for our staff and ed services to prepare for. Thank you.
I look forward to seeing what you can do. But again, for the 100th time, no pressure. We're very excited. Item 11 is not needed. Let's see, nor is item 12. Item 13, adjourn meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion from trustee Ruiz and a second from trustee Novales to adjourn this meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion passes 4-0. This meeting is adjourned at 9:35.